Good morning. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of AKP Sports Talk. And Ari, we have finally reached March. This is one of the most exciting months for just sports betting and sports in general. Obviously, March Madness in a couple of weeks, the WBC in a week, the Combine this weekend, NBA is winding down. There is so much going on this month. Ari, how are you doing first off?
Yeah, I'm doing great. You can't complain when you reach the month of March with, March Madness right around the corner. Like you said, we also have the WBC, NBA. We'll get into MLB today. So a lot of fun stuff in sports coming up, right now and in the coming weeks.
Yeah, this is going to be, one of the more exciting months for sports, just with everything going on with the WBC. But we're going to continue our predictions moving to the NL today. That's what we were going to be covering. And we're going to be starting with the NL East. And you look at this NL East, and it's very, very top heavy with three teams. You have the Braves, who, won the division last year, but unfortunately lost to the Phillies in the NLDS in a 5-game series. And then the Mets, they were the dominant team all year in that division, right? They were the team that was going to win. And then, the Braves started slowly creeping back up. And then, the Mets started losing a few games here and there. And then, Mets fans were getting nervous. And then eventually they lost the division. And then they lost in the wild card round to the Padres. And then you have the Phillies and their amazing run to the World Series. Obviously, they lost in 6 to Houston. But, Houston was one of the better teams. So you can't really blame them. And Philly, a team that gets hot at the right time, who knows where they could have gone. Obviously, that's the thing with baseball. It's not about, obviously it's about better, the teams that are better, but if a team is getting hot at the right time, who's going to stop them? And then the final two teams in that division are the Marlins and the Nats. Obviously, the Nationals, well, they have some prospects to look forward to. Obviously, after 2019, it's been downhill for this Nationals team. No Bryce Harper, no Juan Soto, no Trey Turner, no anyone anymore. No Scherzer, no one. So it's been a really big downhill, just decline, really fast decline for the Nationals. Obviously, one of their biggest stars, who's just been so riddled with injuries, Steven Strasburg. He's going to be out again. So it just feels like the Nationals, nothing goes their way. And then you look at this Marlins team, right? And, obviously Jazz Chisholm, he only played a select amount of games last year, but he's a star. They're going to move him to center field now because obviously we just traded for Luis Arias this offseason, traded for him and giving up Pablo Lopez and some picks. Obviously, Arias just won the batting title for the Twins last year. And, it'll be interesting to see, considering the Marlins did need a bat. And I feel like Arias could be a big-time bat to contribute to that lineup. But, other than that, they lost Jesus Aguilar. They lost Miguel Rojas in the trade. So it's looking like they added, but then they subtracted a lot more. So the Marlins are in this kind of, they're trying to build for the future, but yet losing a lot of prospects in the process, and then also obviously calling up some of their star guys last year heading into this year. So we'll see a lot more of potentially some NL Rookie of the Years. We'll see. But Ari, look, when you see this division, right, you look at the Braves, Phillies, and the Mets. Those are the three teams right now. A lot of people are saying that those three are probably going to be locks again for the playoffs this year. Where do you have this division? What do you like in this NL East heading into the 2023 regular season?
Yeah, so we'll start with the bottom like you did. We'll start off with the Nationals, and obviously there's not too much to look forward to for the Nationals this season. I think it's mostly, obviously, it's about the young players. They got, CJ Abrams and Mackenzie Gore in the Juan Soto trades. I think it's about the development of those two in particular. Like you said, Strasburg, he's kind of banged up again, so I don't even know what his status is for the season officially. You've got guys like Josiah Gray, young pitcher. You got last year, Joey Meneses was actually really good for them, so we'll see if he can pick up where he left off kind of last year. They brought in Candelario to play third base, Dominic Smith to play first base, Corey Dickerson in left field. So some kind of not super old guys, but not super young guys either. So It's probably going to be them in Oakland, I think, at the bottom of like the entire MLB. They'll probably be at the bottom of the National League, but I think it's, obviously it's mostly about the development of the young players, in particular who they got in the Soto trade for them this season. And then the Marlins are kind of an interesting team because, last year they had good pitching, but their hitting was like bottom 5 in the league. And so they traded for Luis Arias. They traded Pablo Lopez, but they could afford to do that just given their rotation and some of the guys that they have coming up as well in their minors. They also signed Gene Segura, who should help them as well in that lineup. And then they signed last offseason Avisail Garcia and Jorge Soler, who were both pretty bad last year in their first year with Miami. So if they could take a step forward, then obviously that could help. And then, like you said, they're led by Jazz Chisholm. They got Garrett Cooper at first base. And then, in the rotation, obviously they're led by Alcantara. And then they got Luzardo. They signed Johnny Cueto this offseason. So, they have a pretty good rotation overall. It feels like they're kind of missing like a number 2, which is what they had in Lopez, obviously. But they cared more about upgrading the lineup just given the status of how bad they were at the plate last year. So, you can't go wrong with bringing in the reigning AL batting champion, obviously, to help their lineup, like contact hitting wise. But, like you said, those two teams should be behind the top 3 pretty easily. In the Mets, Braves, and Phillies, right now, odds-wise, the Mets are a slight favorite for the division, plus 130. Braves are plus 140, so they're basically 1A, 1B, kind of in that range. Obviously, the Mets, they brought in Verlander, obviously. Was a big signing. They signed Kodai Senga from Japan in the rotation. They brought in Omar Narvaez. Braves, they lost Dansby Swanson, obviously. But they still have most of their young core they have kind of locked up for the next decade plus, basically. Phillies brought in Trey Turner. It's a big signing. Taiwan Walker, Craig Kimbrell. They lost a handful of guys from last year, but no one as good as like someone like Trey Turner, obviously. But I still think the Mets and Braves are the top 2. Phillies obviously just got hot at the right time in the playoffs last year, but I still, over the course of the full season, I still think the Mets and Braves are at the top. And, the Mets, the Mets are kind of the trendy, team, obviously, which they were, kind of last year as well. And they dominated the division, like you said, for most of the year until the end when the Braves came back and they were tied, but the Braves won the tiebreaker. I still trust the Braves, organization more top to bottom. So I'm still going with the Braves at the top, followed by the Mets. And, it should be a close battle between those two. And then the Braves, Phillies, Marlins, Nationals, kind of in that order. But this might be the best division in baseball in terms of 1, 2, 3, and I think it could be the case again this season.
Yeah, I'm going to go from bottom to top here too, and then obviously the Nationals. Look, after that 2019 World Series, it's just been downhill, and no fault to them. The players just wanted to move on. Obviously, the franchise was looking in a different direction, and no blame to any other, but. It's definitely a big drop-off for this Nationals team. Obviously, you talked about some of the stars that they have, with Josiah Gray, who's an emerging star, and Meneses, who was a decent starter for this Nationals team. They brought in Candelario. They brought in Dickerson. So, they're building some veteran pieces around their younger guys, obviously. The big trade, which was the Juan Soto trade, they brought in C.J. Abrams and Mackenzie Gore from the San Diego Padres, who were – top prospects for that Padres team now, kind of the key pieces around this Nationals team. And, obviously they're going to be a bottom 2 team in the league with Oakland. And, it's no fault to them, but it's just the business of baseball. And, you kind of have to feel sorry for Nationals fans. After a great 2019 season, you thought a dynasty was going to be, created. And all of a sudden Juan Soto's a Padre, Bryce Harper's a Philly, and Trey Turner's also in Philly as well. So it just happens to, and it's just the unfortunate part of business. But, it's unfortunate to see such a team that was, who snuck into the playoffs too, because it wasn't like, Washington was a dominant team. throughout the NL East, because that was a crazy year for the National League, obviously, with the Nats, Cardinals, NLCS. Who would have thought that? But this Nationals team, obviously, they're rebuilding for the future. They're trying to put the pieces around, Gore and Abrams. So a long road, and, they're still, at the first stop along that road. So big future ahead for the Nationals. You look at the Marlins now, right? And you've mentioned, obviously, they were known for their pitching. Obviously, NL Cy Young, Alcantara, he is one of the best pitchers. He has a nasty changeup. He has one of the best sliders in baseball. He is the guy. He is who the franchise is built around, because he is one of the best pitchers in baseball. And you mentioned last year they had Pablo Lopez, who was a solid 2, and now, they don't really have that anymore, because, they have Luzardo, who was the 3 in that rotation, but, not a certified backup to the ace. And, you also have Johnny Cueto, and, Cueto, who they just signed, and, he was a decent starter for the White Sox last year, just up and down. But, we'll see if he can be a lot more consistent in this Miami franchise. And it looks like Miami, right, is trying to build around, their lineup, obviously, as you mentioned, being bottom 5 in baseball, with their baseball lineup, obviously Chisholm being out for a considerable amount of time did not help, but hopefully they'll have a full Jazz Chisholm, obviously the cover of the MLB The Show this year. And then obviously they brought in Segura, who could be a big help, obviously, from that Philly team who just went all the way to the World Series. So, that could be a good bat for them as well. I feel like Miami is trying, but, they still need a number 2. They definitely need a number 2. And I feel like they're going to be a 500 team, around 500, maybe 80, 81 wins. I don't think anything more, anything less. I just feel like, even though Miami does have the pitching, their bats, who knows, who knows if they can be consistent all year, and which Jazz's injury history, who knows if he can stay healthy for a full season. But, Miami is starting to, put the places in to be a more respectable franchise in baseball in terms of, their lineup, because, it's not like didn't make any moves. I mean, they have Luis Arias, who just won the batting title, John Segura, who, has been a up and down hitter throughout his career, but when he's hot, he's one of the better hitters at shortstop. So, that's definitely a good start for this Miami team. And then you look at the top 3, right? And I'm going to start with the Phillies. And I think the Phillies are a third, but they're a close third. I feel like this Phillies team is being underestimated in this division, even though, yes, the Mets and Braves are great. The Philadelphia Phillies are the one who made it to the World Series. Like, people are forgetting that, right? Yes, they lost the World Series, but the fact that we saw the resurgence of Bryce Harper, right, and he's probably going to be playing DH now. They still have Nick Castellanos, and if he can be that 2020 Nick Castellanos where he was hitting bombs all the time, that's a dangerous lineup for him. They also brought in Trey Turner, who obviously he was one of the best free agent shortstops, if not, you could argue, the best free agent shortstop available in this free agent period. And he went to Philly, and we kind of knew he was going to go to Philly. Him and Bryce obviously have that connection, and now that was the big replacement. You leave John Segura out, you bring in Trey Turner. That's a big improvement for them. They still have a great rotation. They did lose Zach Eflin, which is, not a big loss, but they still have Aaron Nola. They brought in Taijuan Walker, as you mentioned. They still have a decent bullpen. They did lose Ranger Suarez, but they brought in Craig Kimbrel. I feel like this Phillies team is definitely going to be around, the higher point of 80 wins, more closer to 90 wins. I just feel like this team, has done enough, to, even though that they're not going to win their own division, that they are a serious threat to win the World Series this year, just in terms of what they've done this offseason. And I feel like the window has opened wide open for the Phillies, because the Phillies, ever since Bryce Harper went, it was always, when is Bryce Harper going to really lead this team? And we saw it last year, and they came up just short. So why won't it happen again this year? Even though I have Philly finishing 3rd in the division, I feel like Philly is going to be a very dangerous team once the playoffs come around. And then the next team in front of them, it's hard to really say who's going to be 1A and 1B right now. in terms of the Mets and Braves. You can argue that the Mets, obviously, let's talk about the Mets first, who did finish second. Obviously, they did lose to DeGrom in the offseason, but I feel like them losing to DeGrom and making it up for getting Justin Verlander, I guess, really does not make a difference. I mean, even though DeGrom is not healthy half of the year, the fact that they signed Justin Verlander, one of the best pitchers in baseball right now, at his old age, is a big improvement. They also got Kodai Senga, as you mentioned, one of the best pitchers out of Japan, and his. We saw a little bit of him in the last WBC, but now we get to see him in the MLB, and I think he's going to be one. I think he's going to be a Rookie of the Year. I think he's going to have a fantastic season for this Mets rotation. I mean, you look at the Mets rotation from 1 to 5, and it's actually ridiculous. I mean, they still have Carlos Carrasco. They brought in Quintana. They have Kodai at the 3, Max Scherzer, who's the number 2, and then Justin Verlander. My God, that 1 through 5 shouldn't be legal. That's one of the best 1 through 5s in baseball. And then you look at the batting. I mean, even though, yes, the Mets did lose out on Carlos Correa, which would have sent that team, I believe, to playoff great borderline team all the way to World Series contenders if they got Carlos Correa. But still, I believe that this team is still going to be good. You mentioned they have Pete Alonso, who can hit bombs, McNeil, who won the batting title. They still have Lindor, who's the best shortstop in the league right now at short. They still have Eduardo Escobar third. It's not like this team regressed a bunch. I feel like this team just got better in terms of their pitching. And the Mets are going to be scary, but the thing is, the Braves know their number. And in a division where a team knows how to beat you, you're not going to win that division. So I want to say that the Mets are going to win. I could say the Mets are going to win in a few days. But right now, I feel like the Braves just know how to win the AL East. They did it last year. The only big question mark for me is Vaughn Grisham going to be the next, quote-unquote, big step up? Because obviously, first it was Freddie Freeman, and they traded for Matt Olson, and it's like, okay, well, it's not like they really lost Freddie Freeman. They found a replacement pretty quickly, but now they actually lost Dansby Swanson. He chose to leave, and now it puts into question: is Vaughn Grisham really going to be the guy? And yes, I feel like the Braves have set up their future amazing. They traded and signed Sean Murphy, one of the best catchers in the American League, from Oakland. They still have Ozzie Albies at second. They have Matt Olson at first. They have Austin Riley, one of the best third basemen in baseball, at third. They have Ronald Acuna in the outfield still. They have Michael Harris Jr., one of the greatest stars, Rookie of the Year candidate last year, still in the outfield. Their pitching rotation: Strider, who, even though regressed in the postseason, regular season was one of the best pitchers in baseball. They still, I would say Atlanta's pitching did take a little bit of a step back last year. Obviously, Max Fried did not have the year that a lot of people were hoping for him to have, but I feel like a bounce back year for that rotation is going to be evident. And the way the Braves lineup look, they have signed their 1 through 4 to at least 2033. And that's a dynasty. And if the Braves are going to keep playing like this, and, the guys that can just call up anytime, and guys like Michael Harris, who, was just supposed to be a temporary fix, but now all of a sudden is the center fielder for the Atlanta Braves just because of how he has came onto the field, it is dangerous. But my order right now, if I had to say it, it's going to be Braves, Mets, but it's going to be very close. I'm saying like maybe 2-3 games between the Braves and the Mets. And then the Phillies maybe like 2 games or 3 games behind the Mets. And then distant behind those 3 are going to be the Marlins and the Nats. I feel like those top 3 teams, as you mentioned, are pretty much one of the top 3 in baseball right now. You can say the AL East with the Yankees, Rays, and Blue Jays, but in terms of the talent in the NL East with those top 3 teams is crazy. So I definitely agree with you that the NL East has the best top 3 in baseball. I think it's going to go Braves, Mets, Phillies, Marlins, and then finishing off the last place Nationals. And now we move from the NL East to the NL Central, and what a drop-off for this division. Unfortunately, a very big drop-off. The Reds and Pirates, they're they're looking to the future. The Reds, especially, I feel like the Reds have a lot of prospects just waiting to be called up. Pirates are circling around O'Neal Cruz. That's the guy, and also keep Brian Hayes. And then you have the Cubs, who are a very confusing team right now because they're not great, but at the same time, they've made these signings in the offseason as they're trying to make a playoff run. And it doesn't make sense because they don't have a great pitching staff, but yet they're signing guys like Trey Mancini, who is a top free agent, and Eric Hosmer, Dansby Swanson, to boost their lineup. So very, very interesting offseason there for the Cubs. And then the Brewers, the Brewers, they are kind of looking, to figure out what they're going to do with Corbin Burns. I feel like, I don't know if you've been hearing about this, Ari, but, in terms of the arbitration agreement, Corbin Burns and the Brewers are way, way off. And it's just kind of disrespectful, in my opinion. Corbin Burns, one of the best pitchers in baseball. And I feel like the Brewers' rotation is always going to be pretty solid with Burns and Woodruff, but they just lacked a lineup. And obviously, the big trade of the offseason for the Brewers was trading away Colton Wong for Jesse Winker and Abraham Toro. So who knows? Are we going to see NL Comeback Player of the Year, Jesse Winker? We'll see. And then, hopefully Christian Yelich can come back to that 2018 form. Who knows? But the Brewers are definitely a second in this division to the reigning division champs. I think also going to be division champs this year, the St. Louis Cardinals. Even though they lost Yadier Molina, the fact that they got Wilson Contreras from Chicago, so that's a big step because, one, the fact that a Chicago Cub is a St. Louis Cardinal is already a big no-no in baseball. Obviously, those two teams are rivals. But I've been hearing the fact that Contreras is saying that the Cardinals is a quote-unquote better culture organization than the Cubs, saying that he did not enjoy his time in Chicago. But, I feel like the Cardinals had a pretty suffice offseason, even though they lost out on the Trey Turner sweepstakes. The fact that they kept Nolan Arenado, that was kind of one of the bigger things for them this season, is making sure Arenado opted in and he's back. So, they have two MVP candidates at either side of the base path between Arenado at third and Goldie at first. I feel like that's a very, very good duo in the infield. You have Wilson Contreras, who has a big bat as well. And then, I feel like, this, even though the pitching is not the strong suit, the fact that they have a very, very good bullpen does enough with Jordan Hicks and just how much heat he can throw. Very, very good bullpen for this Cardinals team. Ari, what do you like from this NL Central? Obviously, it's pretty top heavy with just probably maybe one team. Maybe you can give it two, potentially making the playoffs. But what do you like in this kind of weaker NL Central? Maybe one of the worst divisions in baseball.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the Reds and Pirates are at the bottom. And I kind of lean towards the Pirates of the two at the bottom. Like you said, their young talent of Brian Hayes and O'Neal Cruz are, what they're looking forward to in the future. The big question is if they're going to trade Brian Reynolds or not. That's kind of the whole offseason, the question, because, Reynolds kind of wants out, but the Pirates haven't traded him yet. I haven't heard anything about him Reynolds sitting out. So it sounds like he's going to play. And it sounds like the trade line, in July could be when they trade him potentially. They brought back Andrew McCutchen, so that's, a cool story, but, it doesn't mean much for them to win. I mean, right now their number one starter is either Roansy Contreras or Rich Hill or Mitch Keller. Like they have maybe one of, if not the worst, starting rotations in baseball. They have David Bednar as their closer, who's pretty good, so he could be a trade candidate at the trade deadline potentially. There's not. They brought in G-Man Choi. They have obviously, they have a handful of pieces that are cool, but all in all, they're probably going to be at the bottom. And then you have the Reds, who at least have a few good pitching prospects, young guys, Nick Lodolo, Hunter Green, who should be better this year. You have Jonathan India, who was the rookie of the year a couple years ago and then struggled last year. So we'll see if he can bounce back. Obviously, you still have Joey Votto. They brought in Will Myers. Again, there's not too much on either the Pirates or Reds to look forward to other than some of the young prospects, more so hitters for the Pirates and pitchers for the Reds. And like you said, the Cubs are kind of in the middle of, not being a top contender, but not being at the bottom either. Bringing in Hosmer, Swanson, Mancini. We'll get another year of Seiya Suzuki, so we'll see what he can do this year. And then you have Stroman, Tyone, Steele, Hendricks, Smiley. And then the bullpen is not very good. So the starters are at least decent. Bullpen is not great. Hitting should at least bring, it feels like the type of team that, it felt like the type of offseason that's more so to bring people into the stands and to actually be a winning team. So you're good enough to where you're gonna draw attendance. You're gonna draw people to the home games, but not good enough to compete for the division or maybe even a wild card spot. So, maybe if everything goes right, they could sneak into a wild card contention, but it's gonna take a lot for that to happen. Especially just given how good the NL East is, like we were talking about. So they're probably going to be hovering around 500, I would guess, the Cubs. And then, like you said, you have the Brewers and Cardinals at the top, and I think the Cardinals are the pretty clear number one in this division. The Brewers, they already lost the right fielder Tyrone Taylor. It was announced this morning he's going to miss the first probably month of the season. You have Willie Adames, who's one of the top, power hitting shortstops in the league. You got Riley Tellez at first base. You got a solid bullpen. Devin Williams at closer, even though they traded Josh Hader, still a strong bullpen. And if they get everything sorted out with Corbin Burns, you have a fairly solid starting rotation. We did see Woodruff regress last year compared to a couple years ago, so we'll see if he can bounce back. But Burns is still one of the elite number ones in the league when he has his mind right. So it sounds like he's going to be playing at full strength, or just not holding out despite what happened with him with arbitration. So we'll see how that kind of plays out. And the Cardinals, they're minus 120 to win the division, and I think they're that big of a favorite for a reason. Obviously, you have Goldschmidt and Arenado leading the way in the lineup. Like you said, they brought in Wilson Contreras. You still have Tommy Edman, O'Neill, Carlson, Luke Barr. Last year, when they traded for Jordan Montgomery from the Yankees, he was actually really solid for them in that rotation. And then you got Flaherty, Wainwright, Nicholas, Matz, and then, like you said, the strong bullpen. Helsley as their closer, Gallegos probably as their setup, and then Hicks as kind of the hard-throwing kind of middle reliever. I think that this division is pretty chalky in terms of how it's going to kind of play out. Cardinals, Brewers, Cubs, and then you could argue Reds or Pirates, but I lean Reds slightly ahead of the Pirates.
Yeah, you look at this division, right? And it's very top heavy. You can argue it's the weakest division in baseball. You look at the Pirates, and it was a great story for them bringing back McCutchen, but this is not Andrew McCutchen of 2013. This is 10 years later, and age is a factor, but a nice, fun 1-year deal for McCutchen back in Pittsburgh. And so that'll be fun for the Pirates. They obviously, you mentioned they did bring Ji-Man Choi in from Tampa Bay. You mentioned they have one of the worst rotations in baseball. They don't even have a true number one yet. And then obviously the big struggle has been, trying to deal Brian Reynolds. There's been rumors that Pittsburgh is trying to, build around him and give him a big amount of money, but he wants more money. And, there was rumors earlier in the offseason that he was going to go potentially to Seattle or maybe even New York because they needed an outfielder. But, I feel like that has all died down. And you mentioned, who knows, a few months down the road, what could happen at the trade deadline or before for Brian Reynolds if, he just really, really wants out. But for now, it's seeming like he's going to be playing this upcoming season in the black and gold for this Pittsburgh Pirates team. So that'll be interesting to see. But you mentioned, other than the fact that they have a pretty decent lineup with some solid guys, we'll see how Brian Hayes can do. O'Neill Cruz, the flashy, young phenom from the DR who, even though he has speed in terms of throwing and on the base path. He can hit the ball hard. So it's definitely a fun time seeing Oneil Cruz bat. But, the Pirates are a long way away from any kind of success. And I feel like they're going to finish bottom of this division. And you look at the Reds, and the Reds, I feel like they're kind of in the same pathway as well. You mentioned they have Nick Lodolo, Hunter Green, some kind of, some young guys to kind of lead that rotation. In terms of bats, they have Will Myers, who, has always kind of been a consistent bat or semi-consistent for the Padres. Jonathan India, who regressed after winning Rookie of the Year. He hopefully may have a bounce back season. They also have some guys down in the minors. Eddie De La Cruz, one of the bigger nationwide prospects in baseball, along with former Mariner prospect Noelvi Marte, who was traded to the Reds in the Luis Castillo trade. So they definitely have a bright future, but I feel like they're going to be a distant fourth as well, finishing maybe 5 to 10 games ahead of the Pirates. And then you have the Cubs, right? You mentioned that they really aren't in this winning position, but yet aren't in a losing position. They have a suffice lineup with guys like Nico Horner, Christopher Morel, Seiya Suzuki, obviously, and a Rookie of the Year. I believe he's injured right now, so but he's out for the WBC. But who knows? Maybe he'll probably come back for opening day. But one of the bigger stars for this Cubs team. In terms of the bullpen, that's where they kind of lack. They don't really have anyone to really get them to close win games. They have a decent rotation with Stroman, as you mentioned, Hendricks, and all those guys. But I feel like they need to bolster their pitching more if they really want to be serious. Because right now they have a pretty suffice lineup with guys like Mancini, who they signed in the offseason, and Dansby Swanson, who they signed for a lot of money, and then also Eric Hosmer, who was bought out of his contract in Boston. I just feel like they have a good lineup, but they don't really have any pitching to back it up. So that's where this Cubs team is confusing, because they're acting like they're winning in win now mode, but their window is not even open yet. Like they have to build to that, and maybe it's going to be the fact that they're building around Dansby with that large contract. Who knows? But right now I don't see the Cubs finishing higher than third. I feel like you're right. I feel like everything would probably have to go right if the Cubs want to be in contention for a wild card. But that's asking a little too much for this Cubs team, especially with Stroman's inconsistencies throughout the regular season. So that's where I kind of feel the Cubs finishing third. And then the Brewers, obviously, you mentioned they have one of the best rotations with one of the best duos with Woodruff and Burns. With Burns, I feel like he definitely is one of the best aces in baseball, when he's on the mound. And, even Woodruff, even though he declined a little bit, he still, has his power to just throw the ball really well. They have a pretty decent bullpen as well. And then you look at the hitting, and that's where they kind of lacked last year. They didn't really have any strong bats. They brought in Jesse Winker, who struggled last year in the Mariners organization with his antics. Let's just say it at that. But hopefully he can bounce back in a new environment, going back to the NL Central, ironically, but playing for the Milwaukee Brewers. And then they still have Christian Yelich. You mentioned they have Roddy Tellez, and I feel like the Brewers are close too, but it's always going to be those two at the top between St. Louis and Milwaukee right now. I just feel like in terms of the which team is worse, I feel like the Brewers just don't really have any solid bats to go off of, and can't really be consistent. And then obviously there's this whole issue with Corbin Burns, so we have to check into that. And then sitting at the top, I agree with you. I feel like this Cardinals team, is kind of the more complete team in this NL Central. They have a pretty decent lineup. You mentioned with guys like Edman, Lars Nootbaar, and some of the outfielders, O'Neill. They're strong guys in the outfield, and then obviously in the infield as well. And then obviously with Arenado and Goldschmidt, I mean that's a duo right there. You bring in Contreras, right? Definitely a great addition there. And no one really talks about it, but you mentioned it when St. Louis and the Yankees did that trade with Jordan Montgomery and Harrison Bader. You really thought that Montgomery was going to be just the fall off piece, and he proved to be a really sufficient starter for that rotation. So pair him with Mikolas and with Wainwright, who's coming back for his final season. So it's definitely suffice enough rotation. I feel like they could have got maybe one more starter to really put themselves to the next level, but maybe they'll look to that maybe toward the trade deadline of pitchers in a really bad situation. And then obviously the bullpen is very strong. You mentioned with Helsley being one of their closers, and then Jordan Hicks being the fast throwing reliever he is. I feel like that's a very strong suit. That's how the Cardinals can win these close games with their bullpen. So I definitely like the Cardinals as well to win this division, even though it's a weaker division. I have the Cardinals winning, and then the Brewers finishing second, the Cubs third, the Reds fourth, and then the Pirates finishing down in fifth place. And then finally, our final division, the NL West, one of the more fun divisions. Diamondbacks, Rockies, excuse me, those two teams, those have always been toward the bottom. Maybe we have a shift this year. The Giants, who had that 106-game win season just a year ago, fell off and finished right at 500 during the 2022 season. And then the top two teams, obviously the top two teams that everyone in the NL West has been talking about, the Dodgers and Padres, those two have been battling recently for the past 3 years. And, maybe the Padres took a step forward and the Dodgers maybe take a step backwards in the offseason. Ari, you look at this final division in the NL West. What do you like? Who do you think's coming out on top? Early preview of the NL West for the 2023 regular season.
Yeah, so like you said, the Diamondbacks and Rockies are at the bottom. I have the Rockies at the bottom. We'll see if Chris Bryant can actually stay healthy this season after he was kind of banged up all last year. You still have CJ Cron, Rogers, McMahon in the infield, Blackman at DH. So they have some bats. Their rotation is, pretty bad. Marquez is still at number one. They have a solid closer in Daniel Bard. So he's potentially a trade candidate at the deadline, assuming the Rockies are, where they're expected to be by then. So they're probably going to be at the bottom. The Diamondbacks are, a interesting kind of young team. You have a pretty solid rotation. Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly, Madison Bumgarner, a pretty, at least stable top three. They made the big trade. The Dalton Varsho traded for Gabriel Moreno from the Blue Jays, so he'll be at catcher for them. Then you still have Christian Walker, Ketel Marte. Then you have Corbin Carroll in the outfield, Alec Thomas, McCarthy. They traded for Kyle Lewis from the Mariners, so if he can stay healthy, then he could at least be, he could be a solid piece. But obviously, his whole problem has been staying healthy. So we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, the Diamondbacks are kind of, I've seen a lot of people like their over under, which I think is like kind of in the low to mid 70s. So they should at least be more competitive this year, at least a little bit more fun to watch. And then you have the Giants, who had the big step back last year, obviously. You still got Logan Webb, Alex Cobb, Shamanaya in that starting rotation. Hitting wise, they brought in Mitch Haniger this offseason. They signed him to, I think it's a 3-year deal. They signed Michael Conforto. You still have Jock Peterson, Brandon Crawford. Joey Bart behind the plate. So, you still have some solid pieces, but, none of them compared to what the Dodgers and Padres are, obviously at the top of the division. Right now, the Dodgers are minus 120, so they're still a pretty heavy favorite to win the division. Of course, the Dodgers still have, they lost some pieces. They still have, a number of high-profile players: Freddie Freeman, Muncy, Mookie Betts, obviously in the outfield. They brought in JD Martinez. They re-signed Clayton Kershaw, so you still have him, Urias, Gonsolin, and May. And then they signed, I believe they signed Syndergaard. They lost Tyler Anderson. But, the rotation should still be solid. And obviously, it's kind of similar to the NL East in a way where the Padres are the kind of the trendy team because of what they did this offseason. And the Dodgers are kind of the more stable team over the years. But the Padres, obviously they have one of the stronger rotations: Darvish, Musgrove, Snell, Walker. They traded for Josh Hader last offseason. At the trade deadline, you still have, they brought in obviously Bogarts, you have Machado, Juan Soto. You'll have Tatis, I think April 20th, I think is when he's eligible to return from suspension. So you'll have him and right field, Soto moving to left field. But you have, one of the best infields in baseball with Cronenworth, Kim, Machado, Bogarts, and then you have Nola behind the plate. I'm still going the Dodgers at the top just because I feel that they're the safer bet to win the division. Even though I know that the Padres are, I'm surprised at the odds. I thought it would be closer odds-wise between the Dodgers and Padres. Dodgers minus 120, Padres plus 125 to win the division. But I think I'm going Dodgers, Padres, and then it's actually close for me between the Giants and Diamondbacks. I think the Diamondbacks are a pretty interesting team in terms of just being more competitive this year. I'm actually going to make that call and go Diamondbacks number 3, Giants 4, and the Rockies 5.
Yeah, I like that. I like that call right there. I definitely agree with you. We look at the bottom, and the Rockies, look, they're a delusional franchise right now. Their owner is saying that they did enough to compete for a wild card, but they didn't make any moves this offseason. They didn't make anything that was absolutely breathtaking away. Like, the only thing they really did was, I'm trying to think. I don't remember what the Rockies have done. So that just shows you how delusional the organization is. They're not good. Hopefully Bryant can stay healthy to really compete for this team. I feel like, Chris Bryant is a name that everyone has forgotten about just because he got injured so much in Colorado and he didn't really do much for that Rockies team. It's not going to be pretty. I have the Rockies finishing last, and I think they're going to be one of the worst teams in baseball this year. Not many people want to say it, but the Rockies are going to be one of the worst teams in baseball, especially in a hitter-friendly park like Coors Field where, you have guys like CJ Cron who can hit 500-plus bombs and, whoever comes into that stadium, it's hard. They play better on the road at home. And, it's just I just don't really feel like this Colorado team is, in the mindset that they're winning any kind of division in the near future. They are rebuilding and I don't know what they're doing anymore, but they're definitely a bottom team. And then you go up, right? You can say the Diamondbacks right now are better than Giants. In terms of what they've done, right? The hype is there. They still have Zach Gallen, who is definitely an NL Cy Young candidate. They have Madison Bumgarner, who regressed, but, I feel like now maybe with a better team around him, who knows? The ceiling is through the roof. You mentioned the Dalton Varsho trade. They got in Moreno and Lourdes Gurriel Jr. I feel like that's a sneaky move for this Arizona team, getting some more bats to that lineup. Ketel Marte coming back to that lineup as well. He's one of the best players in that lineup. They brought in Kyle Lewis, obviously. Sad Mariner fan over here. Loved Kyle Lewis so much. But, unfortunately, injuries just derailed his 2020 Rookie of the Year candidate season, and now he's restarting in Arizona. So, I hope for the best for him, for that Arizona franchise. And, I feel like Arizona has made enough. I feel like Arizona is doing what the Marlins are supposed to be doing. They've made the right moves and moves that have actually helped them on all sides of the ball. They brought in, Moreno, who who's a pretty suffice backup in Toronto. They brought in Gurriel, who is a solid hitter for Toronto Blue Jays team, with him and Teoscar and all those guys. But, they brought in those guys. They still have a top rotation. The only thing kind of concerning for them is their bullpen. But other than that, I feel like they have a pretty strong rotation to finish third in a good NL West division. I feel like as well they have a pretty suffice lineup as well. And I definitely agree with you. I can definitely see the Diamondbacks finishing third in this division as well. And then you look at the Giants, right, and they are trending in the wrong direction. The the San Francisco Giants, obviously after their 106 win season with Logan Webb and Alex Cobb and all those guys, they really fell off, and they finished at 500. With Jock Peterson on the team, and the Giants had an off season from hell. They've had at first it was Arson Judge, and we know how that happened, and then Carlos Correa, and then we saw what happened there. So they missed out on 2 of the top 5 free agents. They had to settle for guys like Mitch Haniger, obviously Mariner for life. They brought in some key guys. They brought in Conforto, who's a guy who was being linked to multiple teams. They brought him in. So I feel like even though the Giants made some decent offseason moves, I don't think it's enough to really compete in a stacked NL West where the top is really at the top. And I feel like in terms of what they were hoping or aspiring for, they really took a step back, right? When you look at it on paper, they did take a step back. So there is plenty of argument and reason to say that the Giants are going to finish fourth in the division behind the Diamondbacks team that has a lot of momentum. So I definitely agree with you there. And then you look at the top two teams, right? And the Padres and Dodgers. The Padres, my goodness, they have money. They are going to be paying Manny Machado so much money, who just signed an extension. They're going to be paying Xander Bogaerts a lot of money, who they just signed this offseason. They already previously had signed Fernando Tatis before he was juicing it up. And then you mentioned he's going to be coming back soon. And then obviously the last guy remaining is going to be Juan Soto. And I mean, my God, you have one of the best top fours in baseball in terms of your lineup. I mean, yes, it's not fantastic, but I feel like it does the job enough. They have a great pitching staff with Musgrove. They brought in Waka. They still have Manaya, who they traded for. They have a decent bullpen. And to finish off, they have Josh Hader, who was the one who silenced the Dodgers in the NLDS in the second round.
Yeah, and eyes on the Giants.
He's on the Giants now?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I guess that one slipped under the radar for me. But anyways, I feel like, with Musgrove and Darvish, that's a great 1-2 combo. And, I feel like that's going to be a reason as to why this Padres team should be a contender for this division, along with the fact that they brought in also a veteran leader in Nelson Cruz, and, just how they still have Hae-Sung Kim, who was, kind of was not supposed to play as well as he did, but now emerged as shortstop, and now that's probably going to move Tatis to the outfield. And, it's hard to say that the Padres aren't going to win the division just because of the momentum they're on, beating this Dodgers team in the playoffs, going all the way to the NLCS, signing Xander Bogaerts in the offseason, which was a surprise. And, they're paying top dollar for all of these guys, right? And I feel like that's what the Padres are in this. They're in this win now mode, and I feel like the window is opening up more and more for them. So that's why I feel like this Padres team is going to be dangerous. And then obviously the reigning division champs, the Los Angeles Dodgers. It's not like they took a huge step back, but they did regress a little bit in terms of what they lost. I mean, they did bring back Clayton Kershaw, which is big. They also still have Freddie Freeman. They still have Mookie Betts. They did lose Trey Turner, but they plugged him in for Miguel Rojas. They unfortunately literally just lost Gavin Lux for the whole season with the torn ACL. Horrible break for such a young guy for that franchise. They still have Will Smith behind the plate. The rotation is still going to be decent with Gonsolin, Clayton Kershaw, who they just brought back. You also mentioned they brought in Syndergaard, who has been, passed around a lot recently. Another new start for Syndergaard. And then you also forget they brought in JD Martinez to kind of boost the lineup. So, that Mookie JD connection once again back from Boston to LA. So, look, it's hard for me to say that the Dodgers aren't going to win the division just because of how the division has looked over years. And even Vegas is thinking that the Dodgers are going to win the division. But with all that, I still think the Padres are going to win the division. I feel like this is the Padres' year to overtake it happened in the postseason. The Padres beat down the Dodgers in 4 games, and I feel like the tides are turning. This is it. I feel like the things are switching up in the NL West, and I feel like this is the Padres' time to finally win the division. So I'm going to go with the Padres, and then the Dodgers are a close second. Follow that. I will say I have the Giants right now, but I feel like the Diamondbacks can definitely make it really interesting. I feel like the Diamondbacks can win about 80 to 83 games, and I feel like that's where that Giants team is right now, in that 80 to 85 range. So I feel like those two are going to come down to the wire, and then way at the bottom is the Rockies. I just feel like, a delusional franchise like that, is just not even going to be near playoff contention, maybe around 60 to 65 games. So right now I have the Padres at the top. Then the Dodgers, who are going to make the wild card at the 2. And then I have the Giants 3, then the Diamondbacks 4, close 4, and then 5 is the Rockies. But for me, I feel like the top 2 and the middle 2 can definitely be interchangeable just on how the season goes. And obviously, I feel like the NL West is going to be one of the more intriguing ones to look at just in terms of the top 4 because, there's a close race at the top between the top 2, and then the middle 2 are interesting because those are 2 teams that, one's heading in the wrong direction, which is how, they've missed out on so many guys. It's obviously then the one's heading in the right direction after they were one of the bigger laughing stocks of baseball for the past couple seasons, now having a good rotation, decent lineup, and, just some guys who want to play some good baseball for that franchise. So it'll definitely be one of the more intriguing divisions to watch in baseball. Opening day, less than 30 days away. We are counting down 29 days away from the beginning of the MLB 2023 season. I feel that's going to do it for us. Ari, you have anything else you want to say?
No, yeah. So Friday we'll get back into college basketball. We're close to MLB, but we're even closer to March Madness starting. So less than 2 weeks away from Selection Sunday at this point. So we'll go over on Friday the latest bracketology. Maybe we'll touch on some of the smaller conference tournaments that were going on this week and what happened in those tournaments and all of that.
Yeah, as I already said, we're getting closer to the MLB season, but there's a big event called March Madness that's coming up very soon. Obviously, so Friday it's going to be a lot more college basketball based. We'll come back to baseball next week as we get closer to the WBC, which starts next week. But for Friday, we're going to focus on the latest bracketology. We're going to be giving out, maybe some big games to look out for ending the regular season for all conferences, this is the final regular season weekend. So, and just looking out to see what's going to be happening as we head into conference championship tournament week and also the World Baseball Classic. It's going to be a fun week next week, but we'll preview all of that on Friday. This has been AKP Sports Talk. That's Ari. I'm Korea. We'll see you guys Friday for some college basketball bracketology and previewing some of those small conference tournaments. We'll see you guys on Friday.